Our planet is changing, it's getting warmer. This is what we call climate change. It's a big problem that affects all of us. Climate change isn't new. The Earth's climate has always changed over time, but what's happening now is different. It's happening much faster than ever before. For millions of years, the Earth's climate has gone through natural cycles. There have been ice ages and warm periods. These changes usually happen slowly over thousands of years, but now things are changing quickly. In just the last 200 years, we've seen big changes. The main reason, human activities. We're burning more fossil fuels than ever before. We're cutting down forests at an alarming rate. We're changing the way we use land. All of these activities release greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. These gases trap heat, making our planet warmer. It's like putting an extra blanket on Earth. The effects of climate change are already visible. We're seeing more extreme weather events. Sea levels are rising, ice caps are melting, plants and animals are struggling to adapt. It's a complex problem, but it's one we need to understand. In this essay, we'll explore what's causing climate change, what its effects are, and what we can do about it. The Earth is getting warmer. Global temperatures have risen by about 1 degree Celsius since pre-industrial times. This might not sound like much, but it's enough to cause big changes. We're seeing more heat waves. Droughts are becoming more common in some areas. In others, we're seeing more floods. The warming isn't even across the planet. Some areas are warming faster than others. The Arctic is warming about twice as fast as the global average. This is causing big problems for the region. Arctic sea ice is melting rapidly. In summer, there's now much less ice than there used to be. This affects wildlife like polar bears and seals. Ice on land is melting too. Glaciers around the world are shrinking. This includes mountain glaciers in places like the Alps and Himalayas. The Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets are also melting. These are huge masses of ice on land. As they melt, they add water to the oceans. Melting ice has serious consequences. It raises sea levels. This threatens coastal communities and low-lying islands. Melting glaciers also affect water supplies. Many rivers get their water from glaciers. As glaciers shrink, these rivers could run dry in summer. This would affect millions of people who depend on them for water and agriculture.
Section 5. Oceans in peril. Acidification and sea level rise. Our oceans are changing. They're getting warmer and more acidic. The oceans absorb about a quarter of the carbon dioxide we release. This helps slow down global warming, but it comes at a cost. When carbon dioxide dissolves in water, it forms carbonic acid. This makes the ocean more acidic. Ocean acidification is bad news for many sea creatures. It makes it harder for animals like corals and shellfish to build their shells and skeletons. This affects the whole marine food web. It could have serious impacts on fisheries that millions of people depend on for food and jobs. Sea levels are rising too. This happens for two main reasons. First, as water warms up, it expands. Second, melting land ice adds more water to the oceans. Since 1900, global sea levels have risen by about 20 centimeters. They're now rising faster than ever before. Rising seas threaten coastal communities. Many of the world's biggest cities are on the coast. Millions of people live in low-lying areas. These areas are at risk of flooding and erosion. Some small island nations might disappear completely. Rising seas also cause problems for agriculture. Salt water can contaminate freshwater supplies and farmland near the coast.
Section 6. Extreme weather, the new normal. Climate change is making extreme weather more common. We're seeing more intense heat waves. These can be deadly, especially for older people and those with health problems. In 2003, a heat wave in Europe killed over 70,000 people. As the planet warms, such events are becoming more likely. Droughts are becoming more severe in many areas. This affects agriculture and water supplies. It can lead to crop failures and food shortages. In some places, droughts are followed by intense rainfall. This can cause flash floods. The soil, dried out by drought, can't absorb the sudden influx of water. Hurricanes and typhoons are getting stronger. Warmer oceans provide more energy for these storms. This makes them more intense and destructive. We're also seeing changes in where these storms form and how they move. This makes them harder to predict and prepare for. Wildfires are becoming more frequent and intense. Warmer, drier conditions create ideal conditions for fires. In recent years, we've seen devastating fires in places like Australia, California, and the Amazon. These fires release more carbon dioxide, creating a feedback loop that further warms the planet.
Section 7. Impacts on ecosystems and biodiversity. Climate change is affecting ecosystems all over the world. As temperatures change, plants and animals have to adapt. Some species are moving to new areas, others are changing their behavior. For example, some birds are nesting earlier in the year. But not all species can adapt quickly enough. Many species are at risk of extinction. The International Union for Conservation of Nature estimates that climate change could wipe out 1 in 6 species. This includes iconic animals like polar bears and emperor penguins, but it also affects many less well-known species. Each loss affects the whole ecosystem. Coral reefs are particularly vulnerable. They're sensitive to changes in temperature and ocean acidity. When water gets too warm, corals expel the algae that live in them. This is called coral bleaching. If it lasts too long, the corals die. We've already lost about half of the world's coral reefs. We could lose most of the rest by 2050. Forests are changing too. In some areas, trees are dying due to drought and heat stress. In others, warmer temperatures are allowing pests to spread. For example, pine beetles are killing millions of trees in North America. As forests change, so do the animals that live in them. This can have ripple effects through the whole ecosystem.
Section 8. Economic consequences of climate change. You know, climate change isn't just an environmental problem, it's an economic one too. Extreme weather events cause billions of dollars in damage each year. Hurricanes, floods, and wildfires destroy homes and infrastructure. They disrupt businesses and supply chains. The costs of rebuilding and recovery are enormous. Agriculture is particularly vulnerable. Changes in temperature and rainfall patterns affect crop yields. Droughts and floods can wipe out entire harvests. This can lead to food shortages and price spikes. And it's not just about food crops. Climate change also affects livestock, fisheries, and forestry. Tourism is another sector at risk. Many tourist destinations depend on their natural environment. Think of ski resorts that need snow, or beach resorts threatened by rising seas. As these places change, they may lose their appeal to tourists. This can have big impacts on local economies. Insurance companies are feeling the impact too. They're paying out more for weather-related claims. This is pushing up insurance premiums. In some high-risk areas, it's becoming harder to get insurance at all. This affects property values and development. It's a growing problem for coastal areas and regions prone to wildfires.
Section 9. Health risks in a warming world. Climate change poses serious risks to human health. Heat waves are becoming more frequent and intense. They can be deadly, especially for older people and those with health conditions. Extreme heat also worsens air pollution. This can cause respiratory problems and heart disease. Vector-borne diseases are spreading to new areas. As temperatures warm, mosquitoes and ticks can survive in places they couldn't before. This means diseases like malaria and Lyme disease are appearing in new regions. It's a growing concern for public health officials around the world. Food and water security are at risk too. Droughts and floods can contaminate water supplies. They can also lead to crop failures. This can cause malnutrition and waterborne diseases. In some areas, fish stocks are declining due to warming and acidifying oceans. This affects the nutrition of communities that depend on fish. Mental health is another concern. Extreme weather events can be traumatic. People who lose their homes or livelihoods to floods or fires often suffer from anxiety and depression. There's also growing eco-anxiety about the future of our planet. This affects young people in particular.
Section 10. Mitigation strategies. Reducing our carbon footprint. We need to act now to slow down climate change. The main goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This means moving away from fossil fuels. We need to switch to renewable energy sources like solar and wind power. Many countries are setting targets to become carbon neutral. Energy efficiency is crucial. We can reduce emissions by using less energy. This means better insulation in buildings. It means more efficient appliances and vehicles. Many cities are improving public transport to reduce car use. Some are creating green spaces that absorb carbon dioxide. Reforestation is another important strategy. Trees absorb carbon dioxide as they grow. Planting trees can help offset some of our emissions. We also need to stop deforestation. Protecting existing forests is just as important as planting new ones. We need to change our diets too. Meat production, especially beef, has a big carbon footprint. Eating less meat and more plant-based foods can help reduce emissions. We also need to reduce food waste. When food rots in landfills, it produces methane, a powerful greenhouse gas.
Section 11. Adaptation. Preparing for a changing climate. Even if we reduce emissions now, some climate change is inevitable. We need to adapt to these changes. This means preparing our cities and infrastructure for extreme weather. We need to build seawalls to protect against rising seas. We need better drainage systems to cope with heavy rainfall. In agriculture, we need to develop crops that can withstand heat and drought. Some farmers are changing what they grow to suit the new climate. Others are using new techniques to conserve water. We also need to protect our food supply chains from disruption. Water management is crucial. Many areas will face water shortages. We need better systems to conserve and recycle water. Some cities are improving their stormwater management to cope with heavy rainfall. Others are finding ways to capture and store rainwater. We also need to protect biodiversity. This means creating wildlife corridors to help animals move to new areas. It means protecting key habitats like wetlands and coral reefs. These ecosystems not only support wildlife, but also help protect us from extreme weather.
Section 12, conclusion, a call for global action. Climate change is a global problem. It requires global solutions. No country can solve this alone. We need international cooperation. The Paris Agreement is a step in the right direction, but we need to do more. We need stronger commitments and faster action. Everyone has a role to play. Governments need to set policies and invest in clean energy. Businesses need to reduce their emissions and develop sustainable practices. Individuals can make choices that reduce their carbon footprint. Every action counts, no matter how small. Time is running out. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. We need to act now. We have the knowledge and technology to make a difference. What we need now is the will to act. The future of our planet is in our hands. We can choose to continue on our current path, or we can choose a sustainable future. It won't be easy. It will require changes in how we live and work. But the alternative, a world ravaged by climate change, is far worse. Let's work together to protect our planet for future generations.